Welcome to another version of or episode of Moving the Rock. Another version, yes. Do you like my background? Let me rethink that background. Hang on a second.
We're always upgrading the versions. We know. It's the consistency and the improvement at the same time.
Outstanding. So Moving the Rock, it's our last session of 2020. We'll be thinking about today, of course, as always, lessons in deal momentum and how to drive sales growth. Today, I've got Chris here with me because I want to talk about what we've learned in 2020 about what it takes to actually develop organizations leveraging training, right? And how do we achieve deeper outcome-based sales competencies for people and teams using the tools that we have at our disposal. And what's really interesting is that most organizations really haven't figured out how to truly take traditional training and apply it in a way that creates that deeper level of outcome-based competencies. And Chris, I'm going to let you put a finer point on this, but when I talk about outcome-based competencies, I'm talking about the old school way of defining competency, which is, did you complete the class or the course? Did you complete the assessment at the end? Did you score at least an 8 out of 10? And, did you give me a good review? You are now competent in the subject. And yeah, we can deliver training and get great accolades for the experience. One, because maybe we were good. Two, because maybe the people who we're talking to or communicating with in the audience don't want to seem like they're not team players. So of course they're going to say, wow, awesome investment company, congratulations. And then they go away and continue to do what they've always done. So for me, outcome-based competencies, Chris, means, did you go through the program? Did you learn to apply it? And did you leverage the application of what you learned to generate measurable improvement in some way?
Yes. It makes me think of when I was teaching my kids to ride a bike, and wrestling and thinking a lot about this idea because, we grow up now in this context of education where you do something and then you get a grade. And it's like, that's just not how life works.
Right.
You do something and you achieve the result or not. You get to the outcome you want or not. And so I was thinking about all this and I was thinking, how weird would it be, Jimmy, if I said, hey, man, imagining my kids were younger, our kids are similar ages, so they're driving more than they're riding bikes. But imagining if our kids were younger and I said, hey, Jimmy, I want to share you something cool, man. I want to show you a video. I have it here on my phone of me teaching my daughter to ride a bike. And you're going along with it. You're a dad. I don't really want to watch this, No, but everybody thinks their kid sings amazing or whatever, but I'll watch it. So I play the video and you see me with my daughter sitting at the kitchen table, and I have a dry erase board there. Right. And I write out with the dry erase board 4 steps, kick your leg over the seat, start pedaling, put your hands on the handlebars, balance. And you see me like drill this into her, these 4 points over and over and over. And on this video, then she gets to the point that she can state it back. She has a PhD in the 4 steps. She could teach a college class on the 4 steps. And I say to you, Jimmy, wasn't that cool? I just taught my daughter how to ride her bike. You would watch that video and what would you say?
I'd say, yeah, but let's see it.
Can she really ride the bike? And so what we've done in everything, we have totally, from an educational model that's completely flawed, broken the understanding of what it means to train, to impact, to lead, to develop, because it's all based on this knowledge transfer. And knowledge transfer is not where you learn the most because you're not applying it. You're not wrestling with it. You're not getting that direct feedback. You're just acquiescing mentally to something. And your life's not going to be changed by that, right?
Right. It reminds me of a story involving one of my kids, my oldest, Sophia. She's been through 4 or more years of German. And I remember sitting around, right? We talk about this idea of fluency. So when they go through courses, they talk about this concept of fluency. So the promise from the professor was after a certain number of years, you'd be fluent. And then I asked, is that the same thing as being conversational? And there was a gap. We didn't know. So we went and found out. And we would always, have kind of fun whenever we would watch a show where somebody was speaking German. And since we're watching a lot of Netflix nowadays, we get a lot of shows like that. We test her ability to understand what the hell they're talking about on TV. But it's the same kind of thing, right? You can go through the course, somebody can call you fluent, but are you conversational? Can you hail a cab? Can you find a restaurant? Can you book a hotel room? Can you have a conversation with somebody who can't help you because they know a little bit of English?
I love that. That's perfect. That's exactly. I mean, and what's happening for a lot of people, and this is what's so powerful about as we think about closing 2020 and where we head for 2021, our egos feel so threatened and we want to protect them. And I have to tell everybody listening to this story, twice in the last week, once last week and once this week, Jimmy and I have different skill levels that we're both competent in and successful in, leadership and sales being key areas, but Jimmy's more advanced than me. And so in sales, and I love to get his thoughts and feedback. So last week, man, I had a crazy win for us and I'm sharing about it. And he found the one thing I could do better. And then the same thing this week. But you know what? Here's the thing. That one thing is more valuable to me than anything else because it showed where I can get better. I mean, in fact, because it happened kind of recently and I'd gone upstairs to get my tea before we did this show for our listeners, I was like, I was bragging on it. I was like, I know where I'm good and I can get better, but then you take that horizon and extend it even more. And I was, it was fun to joke about it and be like, I did it all so good, but I had this one thing. But that's the thing. And what happens when your ego is protected and it's and everything makes you feel small, you're in this environment. And I think we've cultured this sadly, where you have to feel so good about yourself. And if you can get to the point that you just already know who you are, you've got a solid core there, let's freaking grow. Let's grow. I don't want decades on repeat. I want to be in experiences where I'm growing like crazy. So you're living it, man.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that's obviously the benefit of a strong partnership is where both folks can deliver what they do well and also learn from each from the other, which is really what happens between us. This is not where I had planned to go, but you brought this to my attention when you talked about ego and creating what I would call a safe space or a safe place to learn, which requires us to make mistakes. And I'd like to hear how you do this. Those folks out there who have been through any one of my programs have heard me do this. And I do this for very specific reasons. The first thing I do when I start a training program is I kick off with my no bullshit rule, which gives anybody in the class or anybody in the session, anybody in the room, a chance to raise their hand and just call out bullshit. If they hear something I say and they interpret it in a way where it doesn't make sense or it goes against something they firmly believe, I'm not in that room to feed my ego. I'm in that room to help folks take a step. And I can't help them take a step if they view me as feeding them stuff that's just garbage. And that's really how I came up as a salesperson. I really didn't believe any of the guys that I was listening to who were training me because I felt like they were not there for me. They were there for themselves. So the first thing I do is put myself on the spot, create the ability for the room to hold me accountable. And the deal that I have with my client, the person paying me to be there, is anybody in the room can walk away. And if enough of them walk away, you don't have to pay me a red cent. It's that way of holding the person at the front of the room, the teacher, accountable. And then the second thing I do, Chris, which is, I think you've heard me say, is, we all suck at sales. We all suck. Even if we're experts, we can make bonehead mistakes. And we oftentimes need other folks on our team to bring those mistakes to our attention. So The other thing is I like to disarm the room and create that safe place where nobody's expected to be flawless, especially me. And in fact, this is the third thing. So now I've just thought of a third thing that I do. I'll even demonstrate this by um, conducting real plays or role plays with a real
I, what I used to say to myself for years was, Chris, once you've said it with clarity, sit there and blink. Just wait. You don't have to fill every second with some
Right.
words. I sit there and I blink because everybody processes differently, mental structures, however they think through things out loud, whatever. Sit there and blink. Let that soak in. This outcome is a live thing that's being shaped right now. We're going to get specific. We're going to get definite. We're going to get as much clarity as they want, but let's let it grow. And it can't grow if I'm sucking all that oxygen out of there.
Right. So let me ask you this, and then we'll move on to the next phase of our conversation, which I'm excited about. But before we do, I'm really curious. This idea of partnership and this idea of having an impact really requires there to be cooperative, a real intense and dedicated cooperative relationship between the person doing the coaching or the teaching and the person receiving the coaching or the teaching. How do you, what levels of effort do you take to cultivate that cooperation?
Well, number one, I'm first trying to relax everybody through something fun, funny, cozy, warm. I am an intense person. I think through things in an intense way. My brain kind of like words things, in a way that has this like definitive, almost, not to be weird about it, but like sage like quality. Like those kind of phrases are how my brain forms thoughts. I remember when I was in college and I heard about somebody I wanted to work for, and I ended up working for him. I was like, what was he like? And she was like, he was so intense. And I was like, I want people to say I'm intense. So I have that thing about me that is good and bad. It's good because it's who I am. It's bad. It's not who I am all the time. Me at my best moves in and out of that. And I'm dropping these crazy 80s, 90s raps in the kitchen with the kids. I'm goofy as I can be. So for me, it's setting that tone and pace that I want this kind of engagement. My first big corporate thing, I remember I was driving there to meet up with the guy to see if I would close this speaking engagement that was a big deal that landed me multiple years, tons and tons of business. Anyway, I'm driving up and I'm like, okay, this is what's going through my head, Jimmy. Do I only tell business stories or do I tell personal stories too? While I'm driving there, I remember I'm going to tell business and personal stories because I'm both of those, in this speaking engagement. Well, so we finalized the deal, handshaking on it. And he says, hey, when you come in, don't just tell business stories. I want to hear those personal stories you share also.
Right.
Now, if he would have asked me to do something that compromised who I am or values, like don't tell any of those personal stories, I would have said, that's who I am. Because I made that decision before that happened. However, what's powerful is that decision got affirmed. I mean, obviously, if somebody says, please only tell business stories for this engagement, that would never happen. But if they needed me to, I would. I'll meet them where they are. But you get what I'm saying. And so for me, there's a tone and a presence that, I'm setting a pace. I'm setting a reality. And then secondly, I'm figuring out your reality and I'm meeting it where it is. If that person is insecure or not super advanced and aware as a leader, then I have to meet them where they are faster because they can't handle kind of like building this joint experience and world together. But the best is when I can set that pace. No matter who they are, they meet me where I am with that a little bit. And then I figure out like, what's the center point of who they are? What's their driving ideologies? What's their worldview? You can figure all that stuff really quick. And I'm vibing and syncing up with them. So it's a light touch of this passionate, intense coziness and then getting into their worldview. If they're insecure, we have to get into their worldview really quick because they can't handle, there's too much disjointedness. Is that too complicated of an answer? How does that sit with you?
I think I would, in my brain, I like to simplify things because it allows me to retain them. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that it's this idea of, I think of relate, so be relatable with your stories and so forth, and then elevate, bring your intensity to the level that inspires them to bring their intensity, and maybe makes the session a bit more energetic, intense, focused.
Yeah, I love it. I've never thought about my process until you asked this. So I would say relate, co-create, elevate.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
so I'm either relating to them very quickly or letting them relate to me. We're co-creating a moment as that mingles together, and then we're elevating to what, because that makes every situation unique. I'm still me, but I'm sitting in those engagements ready to lead, but hungry to learn. I don't always point out what I'm learning, but I'm taking something away from that exchange. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I love that simplicity. That's how I would explain it. Relate, co-create, elevate.
And that's cool. And for the folks listening, I mean, we're talking about how we approach the world. If any of this resonates with you, the reason we're going into this detail is because we want to help you if you are looking for a way to maybe break through with your team and reach your team as you train them. These are interesting insights. Hopefully, they're interesting insights for you. They're interesting insights for me. I'm learning a lot from this conversation. Chris, let's take another step now and talk about this idea of the purpose for training. Right, this idea. When I think of sales training, I think of this idea of activating my team and unifying my team. And the goal as a leader, if I'm going to make the investment of time and effort and ask my folks to make the investment of time and effort, I think of this idea of aligning, right, my people, roles, and goals for higher performance. So when we talk about setting expectations, delivering results, I break that down into people, roles, and goals. I think about the folks that I have. I think about their connection or fit to the role that I'm asking them to play. And then I think about the goal that combination of right people in the right role should produce. And so when we think about sales training, especially because it's so easy to measure outcomes, right? Did revenue go up or down? Did margins go up or down? Is my pipeline more qualified or less qualified? All that stuff. It's really about connecting. It's about optimizing that team at an individual level, right person, right role, going after the goals that they focus on. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, I love it. And I think that, not only do we apply that to revenue, we apply that to leadership in a standpoint of a term we were talking about earlier. What's it mean to to possess executive maturity? Um, you
Right.
know, I could say to somebody that doesn't have a lot of management experience, when in doubt, do what a healthy parent would. Um, and I know some people don't have, a picture of that that's very strong or something they can imagine. But beyond that, because a healthy parent is a great paradigm for just healthy management. But a person who has a capability for executive maturity, they're able to know when to use logic to advance something, when to use intuition for leaps, how to not let the ego be the driving force of their reactions, how to understand what they're getting from others and when they need to pay attention to subtleties and nuance. Um, I had a video meeting this morning with a team, and I was presenting, and I paused, and I was like, "Go ahead." And he was like, "How did you know I was going to ask something?" Because I saw you start to take a breath. I was watching his body language, right? Even by video. And so it's just this idea that your decision making is free of unaware motives. You're not just expecting people to match your personality or your enthusiasm. And so I mean, I could define outcome after outcome after outcome after outcome for what it means to be a really solid leader who possesses an executive maturity. At the end of the day, do people follow your leadership, and are they better for it, right?
Right.
And you can quantify that in a lot of different ways, but that's the outcome. And what's amazing to me, and this isn't a knock on anybody, this is just the reality. the number of organizations that I have sat in and seen the executive table and been in awe at the fact that there was no overly undeveloped weak link. Zero.
Right. Right.
Because, there's not this outcome focused approach to leadership, just like there, needs to be for revenue and sales. We hope and take for granted that these people are advancing and progressing when oftentimes they're not. And the results, as you know, show it.
Right. And why would they be if the company isn't proactively and purposely making an investment in development? Why would they be getting better?
Yeah. Well, the average person isn't, dedicating, let me say this way, the average leader in those situations isn't dedicating time, effort, and energy of their own resources to grow like crazy. That's why, I mean, the weird thing is over the last, whatever many years, 5 or 6 years, the number of people that have paid out of their own pockets
Right.
because
Right.
the company budget wasn't there, right? And they're like, I got to grow. I
Yeah.
can't not grow.
Man, you're taking me down another path that I wasn't planning on going down, but I have to do it.
Shoot, I'm trying to support the path you're on.
No, no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So you're reminding me. You're reminding me of an amazing experience that I had. Uh, those who know me, who've worked with me, know my story, which uh, my kind of transition into this career began in 2005 when I hired a life coach who I had for 10 years. And one of the experiences that I had early on as a coach um, was working with an individual who was seeking coaching outside of his relationship with his spouse. So he was doing, Chris, what you talked about. He was investing in improving himself. His spouse didn't want anything to do with it. And so when I talked to my coach about this, the wake up call for me was that the reality for folks who seek improvement or development, when the rest of the folks that they're with don't, that generally causes a breakup. It's true in marriages. It's true in leadership teams. It's true in any team dynamic. So when I think about applying that to sales or to leadership in business, do I really want to be the CEO who encourages individuals to go seek whatever the hell they want to improve themselves? I mean, now maybe they get to a level where, hey, this is better than it was, so that's cool. But eventually those people are going to develop themselves in a direction that may or may not be, and most likely will not be, consistent with the direction that you want to take your company or that you want to take your team. So there's a lot of power in having a single unifying development plan that everyone's a part of, so that the organization can invest in everyone and everyone can proceed at their own pace, but they're all heading in the same direction. They're all on the same bus. What's your experience with that? I mean, is that something you relate to?
Yeah, well, organizations plan the stuff that's easiest to plan. So they'll have a marketing campaign and a step-by-step pieced together, holistic, strategic, brilliant, sometimes campaign they're running.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, show me your leadership development plan. Well, we don't have one, or we do performance reviews once a year, or, we're all reading this book. Okay. Reading the book is great. I mean, that's better than some. But why would you not? And I love the way that one of the CEOs we worked with said it. He said, the scalability of our organization depends on the scalability of our people.
Right. Right.
So how can we learn to not fear change, but grow? Well, just because something is hard doesn't mean it can't have a process also. And you can build a plan for that too. And I get it. Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth, the Mike Tyson saying. That plan is not going to work perfectly, but that plan gives us something to react to. To be a little woo about it without being too woo, you can't actually recognize the adaptation you need to make until you already have a plan. So, I'm looking at an organization going, all right, do you want to solve all your future problems? Yeah. Well, let's invest in leaders today. Let's build a plan to invest in leaders today, because then we're going to have a pipeline of leaders ready to solve tomorrow's problems, or we're going to have the culture and environment that's going to be able to recruit and bring them in. How are we going to develop them? Let's put that into place
Right.
now, because if we wait, it'll be too late.
Right.
And no organization wakes up and says, I'm thinking of right now what's happening in our city as the clothing industry is changing, the fashion industry. Organizations that were hot to work for 4 or 5 years ago, now executives want to get out of there
Right.
because it's changed. And because it's changed, they're going to have a harder time drawing in that talent, developing those people who are going to solve their future problems, because they don't have a plan. If you care about it, you'll put a plan together.
Right. Right. That's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. So let's take it to the next level. And before we wrap up, uh, when there's so many connections between sales and leadership, and I think
Mm-hmm.
we'll find another connection here. When we think about developing that unifying team development plan, one that's going to connect people to their roles and goals, uh, and also, one that's always on, right? So, what sense does it make to train somebody or a
Mm-hmm.
team once a year and then expect that training to have an impact throughout the year? So we're for 2021, we're now thinking about and executing development as a utility, training as a utility. So we have a unified developmental plan with its identified components that's always on, always available to members of the organization. What's different about this plan is that it's also organized in a way that delivers exactly what the team members need when they need it. For example, when a new salesperson joins an organization, they need the same they have the same goals and they need the same development expertise when they're a new rep as they do when they're veterans starting a new selling year. So what I mean by that, as a new sales rep in a new role, the first thing they have to do is build their pipeline as quickly as they can. The number of qualified opportunities that they have to cultivate, so that they can then take the next step of transforming that pipeline into revenue. So there's build your pipeline, generate new revenue, and then drive account growth. Once you have closed some deals, how can you land and expand? And then once you've mastered those steps, the next level is developing your leadership skills. How can you develop essential leadership skills that not only help you perform better, help you contribute back to the team, but also help you elevate yourself and advance your career to whatever next level you might want to take? So when we think about a simple approach to developing an always on training as a utility paradigm for a sales organization, we structure the content so that a salesperson can build their pipeline, generate new revenue, drive account growth, and develop their leadership skills as they need to as a new rep or when they're starting a new selling year. Because the same thing is required when you're kicking off a sales year. The first thing you do is look at your pipe. Is it strong enough to help me hit my goal? If it's not, you got to make that investment. Then you've got to focus on refining your sales skills to have more conversion from that pipeline. And then think about how do you develop those accounts, even if you're only generating referrals from those accounts. And then think about how do you establish yourself as a leader on that team. So it's a different way of looking at training. It's not project based. It's competency and outcome based. And what we've found as we've tested this is it has a huge initial impact on organizations, which is great, but it's also an impact that we can sustain. I'm bringing this up now to you, Chris, because I see the connection thinking about organizationally. If this concept works in sales, And we can help a sales leader think about how to dynamically improve the organization, the sales team, to actually get them to be really good at their jobs, and then put them on track to become competent, trusted, and respected leaders. I'm developing a track here for people to actually build their career and continue their career in my organization.
Bingo. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Now, I mean, I'm thinking of the word that you used earlier, this idea of succession planning or sustainability in the organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it comes down to the simple definition of leadership that I prefer over everything else: leave everything better. And those three words are intentionally a part of that. Leave. You're not leading until you're thinking about when you're not there. I mean, like, you know, at a level of, I want to build my business to sell it. At a level of, I want a sales team that delivers predictable, repeatable revenue. At a level of, I am a team member who manages the graphic design images, and I'm moving up to this, the next tier up in the marketing organization. How do I leave this better? And I like the leave everything better, because as you and I appreciate, everything is leadership, right? I want
Right.
to leave every moment better. This is weird, but I remember hearing it in college and it impacted me. I heard this guy say, leaders pick up the trash in the parking lot on the way into the building. Um, I mean, it's like everything, everything. Of course, now sometimes I'm like, ooh, that looks pretty germy. But leave everything better, and so you're thinking about it, what it's like when you're not there. And if you're going to leave everything better, it's going to be about values, relationships, and systems. Everything comes down to that. The values that I'm leaving behind, what the habits were that reinforced these systems and the choices that were made, and how we took care of people and relationships. And people, I understand leadership's complex and it's lonely and it has tons of variables that could come out of nowhere. And I love that part of it. For me, leadership is like trying to balance on a rolling cylinder on top of a balance ball while jumping up and down on a pogo stick. In high growth environments, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. But at the end of the day, I leave everything better. How? Making sure that the values were held and progressed, because progressed means the values may need to advance or upgrade. Make sure the systems kept supporting where we wanted to go. They were valued, they were known, and we changed them as we need to. And that relationships, that people were empowered and growing because of this, because the real vision is the people. The vision isn't more sales, the vision isn't revenue. All of those matter, but the real vision is that people grew, they were empowered, they changed. Whether it's the customer, we made their lives better through making them a part of or getting them connected to a solution that they really wanted. The sales staff, as they developed along the way. And a healthy organization is going to have a plan to leave everything better. That is all that matters. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
I could go on and on about that.
No, I love it, man. I love it. I'm looking at the time, and it's about time to wrap up. But before we do, I'm really tempted to ask you, since we're at the end of 2020, 2 weeks to go, it's a new year. Uh, what do you think about when you think about 2021?
Um, Really doing everything we've talked about today, living it out personally, because I feel like what's been under my nose for years that I've seen so clearly through 2020, through COVID, through circumstances, and through my relationship with you is there's a bigger vision on how I can help people leave everything better. And I say I with you because it's the we, what we can do together um, to help people leave everything better. And so for me, I'm very activated on that vision. And like anything, I've got a plan and let's go burn it down. It won't work like we think, but I suspect this. it's going to work better than we think in some ways, because that's typically what's happened when I've found a period of reinvention. So I'm excited for 2021.
Yeah,
Um, I'll leave it at that.
that's awesome. I think what my wife and I talk a lot about is the original vision, actually, that Florist was founded on. In the first 15 years of my career, we built a lot of companies, and I was part of a lot of venture-backed startups. We created a lot of jobs. And as I got older and started having kids and so forth, I was really thinking about how important job creation is,
Mm.
and investing in the engine of job creation, which are small and mid-market businesses. And so we developed this way of thinking about creating jobs and its impact uh, through a value chain that we identified. Strong companies build strong communities build strong families create brave kids. And so
Mm.
our vision is this idea of strong companies, brave kids. And, you know, this year more than any really put an exclamation point on that.
Mm.
And I'm looking forward to kind of breaking out of, this kind of this constant fire drill that this year was about. I mean, 2020 was wonderful in terms of the pressure it created and the diamonds that it formed. Uh, but I want to get back to the work at hand now that we've rebuilt and repositioned the organization and our deliverables and so forth. Now, how do we get back to, at least mentally, that focus on the vision that we entered 2020 with? That's really what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I love that. Can I offer this real quick? 30
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah,
It's kind of like we got good at the last game that we were playing. Let's call it soccer, basketball, football, whatever. And we knew the fundamentals. And what we've done this year is embraced a new game. We've transcended the game, and we're making a new game. And now we've got some fundamentals to work and some fundamentals to learn. And so when the highlight reel runs, they won't know all the pain, and when they look at it and go, man, they reinvented the game.
I love it, man. It's a good thing to be focused on. And here's to everyone who wants to reinventing the game, becoming self-actualized, operating at the edge of your abilities, and finding your own definition of success in 2021. Thank you for joining us in 2020. For Chris and for me, have a great holiday season, a happy new year, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.